One cable was broken in a different manner than the three other ones. So that was something that we had to investigate.
Two cables run to the elevator on the tail. One pulls it down to pitch the nose down. The other cable pulls it up to pitch the nose up. That's the one that broke before impact. If it snapped in flight, the plane would have been thrown into a severe dive.
Damn it. The failure of the pitch-up cable was consistent with the trajectory that was described by the eyewitnesses.
Dove into the water.
Finally, investigators understand why Michel Santurenne lost control of his twin otter. An extremely rare mechanical failure that came without warning. It's a revelation that leads to a more urgent question.
Okay, let's send these to Estelle in Paris and see what she thinks.
They must now figure out why the cable snapped before it happens to someone else. When the pitch-up cable arrives in Paris, materials specialist Estelle Boncharel examines it closely. She sees something strange. The cable shows clear evidence that different strands broke at different times and for different reasons.
The external strands were worn and those on the inside were not. They had snapped.
Distinctive damage on the outer strands suggests something has been rubbing against the cable.
It looks like 50% worn down over time.
When we looked at this cable under the microscope, we were able to see that every external strand showed these signs of wear, which added up to very substantial damage.
The pitch-up cable runs from the control column in the cockpit to the elevator, passing through a series of plastic guides. Every time the pilot pulls the nose up, the cable rubs against the guides. Planes experience the most wear and tear during takeoff and landing. It's important for mechanics to monitor the number of flights to help assess wear.
48.
Airline records provide a troubling clue.
More than 50 flights here.
Air Moria, you were clear for...
Air Moria planes make frequent short hops and make many more takeoffs and landings than most large airliners.
On average, it performed 50 to 70 takeoffs a day and landings too. The same plane.
Investigators need to know how all that back and forth movement could have affected the pitch-up cable. They devise a test that replicates the friction on the cable. But there's another factor that must be taken into account.
This is the only plane in the Air Moria fleet with stainless steel cables.
That we found out that there was a different type of control cable used for this particular aircraft.
The accident plane is a new addition to the Air Moria fleet. The airline's other planes have control cables made of carbon steel. But Flight 1121's cables are made of stainless steel. Stainless steel withstands salt corrosion better than carbon steel.
It would make sense to make the decision to use stainless steel so that your cables would corrode less in a very saline environment. Cables could be susceptible to corrosion more than if you would operate over land.
But stainless steel cables also have a disadvantage. They wear down more quickly from friction, something Air Moria failed to take into account when drawing up the maintenance schedule for the Twin Otter that crashed.
A stainless steel cable contains chrome, which makes it better at resisting corrosion. It also contains nickel, which can make it more sensitive to wear.
Lab results confirmed that the frequent short flights helped wear away the outside of the stainless steel cable.
The stainless steel is worn, just like on Air Moria.
The wear was the result of rubbing against parts of the plane.
It could be a crucial discovery, one that finally explains why a critical control cable broke in flight. Investigators suspect friction weakened the cable so much that it snapped as Santoren was pulling his elevator up to climb.
At first, we thought that the cable broke because of the wear. That was our first impression, because the wear was significant.
Boncharel puts the theory to the test. She recreates the force used by Santoren to pull up the nose of the plane. If she's right, the worn cable should snap. But it doesn't break.
Once we performed this test, we saw that with 50% wear, you still needed much more force. A force 10 times stronger than what you'd find in flight during this phase of flap retraction.
Thanks to the tests, we realized that even a cable worn down by 50% could have withstood the stress of the entire flight.
Cable remained intact.
We had to figure out what phenomenon could have weakened the cable.
Something else helped to snap that cable. What?
Investigators know that planes sometimes sustain hard-to-detect damage from small impacts with ground vehicles. If an airport vehicle accidentally ran into the plane's elevator, the impact may have broken more wires in the already worn pitch-up cable. Bouillard checks the records at both airports on the Twin Otter's route, Moorea and the larger airport in Tahiti where it parks overnight.
Thank you.
He needs to know if the plane was ever involved in an accident.
Nothing. No impact reported.
We didn't find any evidence of impact on the control surfaces, which eliminated the possibility of contact with another vehicle during overnight parking.
It's another dead end. There seems to be no way to explain why a cable would snap in flight. Until Bouillard notices something on the taxiway at the busy Tahiti airport.
Tell me, how close do those jets get to the Air Moorea planes?
We targeted the phenomenon of the exhaust from a jet engine, a phenomenon called jet blast.
Jet blast is the powerful exhaust expelled from jet engines. The hurricane force winds can reach speeds over 160 kilometers per hour.
A plane at full power, a plane like an Airbus or like a Boeing, whose power can flip a plane a few dozen feet behind it. It's a phenomenal force.
Investigators study the layout of Tahiti's airport. They need to know if the Air Moorea planes could have been damaged by jet blast.
Okay. The Air Moorea Twin Otters are parked here.
They learn that Air Moorea parks its planes very close to a taxiway used by powerful jets. Airports routinely set up jet blast barriers to protect planes from the dangerous force. There should be barriers to protect the Twin Otters at Tahiti's airport, but they've been removed.
Now look at this.
It's an important discovery.
The jets, they back out here.
These barriers were removed to make it easier to go from one parking lot to another. There was no longer this physical barrier to protect the Twin Otter planes.
The Airbus or Boeing jets were found, let's say, about 50 meters away from Air Moorea's parking. Very close.
The Air Moorea planes are parked right in the path of the jet blast.
This plane had been parked in an area that was prone to receiving blasts from the large carriers during their departure. We therefore arrived at this hypothesis. that there was a very high probability that the cable was weakened by jet blast.
Alain Bouillard learns that Air Mauria's planes are especially vulnerable to jet blast because of an airline policy designed to prevent accidents. The Twin Otters are parked with the elevators locked in a nose-down position. It makes it impossible to get off the ground with the elevators locked.
It was locked by a device that stopped the cables from moving and prevented the elevator from moving.
But the nose-down position likely increased the damaging effects of the jet blast. Investigators suspect that, like a sail in the wind, the tilted elevators caught the full force of the blast, putting extra strain on the locked pitch-up cable.
If the controls are locked, it pulls and transfers this energy directly to the cable.
They now wonder if the force of the jet blast is enough to break a worn cable even further. Another cable test provides the answer.
There was a cable worn down by 50%, a cable that was still able to resist a hefty amount of strain, and then a jet blast phenomenon left the cable so fragile that it only had 1 or 2 strands left intact.
Rather than tearing the cable completely apart, the jet blast left a few strands of wire, just enough for Flight 1121 to take off, but not enough to survive the rigors of a 7-minute flight.
They were hanging by a thread.
If the jet blast had severed the cable completely, Captain Santurén would not have been able to get his plane off the ground. But once airborne, Captain Santurén and his 19 passengers are one thin strand of wire away from disaster. Investigators reproduce the forces created as the pilot adjusts his controls. Captain Santurén reaches 400 feet and retracts his flaps, causing his Twin Otter to pitch down slightly. He adjusts his elevator to pitch back up. It's enough to snap the final strand of the worn and damaged cable.
He didn't have a chance.
We determined that the force needed to correct the pitch of the plane was strong enough to break the last strand.
There was nothing the pilot could do to save his plane and his 19 passengers.
You can imagine his reaction. What's going on? The cable broke. The control column came back, and by the time you analyze what happened, the plane drops very quickly, and a few seconds later, you've hit the Earth.
The Air Mauria accident killed 20 people and forever changed the lives of the victims' families. Bouillard and his team leave French Polynesia, determined to make it safer to fly on Twin Otters.
The first recommendation was an urgent request to check the cables on all planes equipped with stainless steel cables.
Today, there are tougher maintenance and inspection standards around the world for stainless steel control cables.
The main lesson from this investigation, yes, is the risk of jet blast at airports.
The Air Mauria disaster raised awareness throughout the industry of the vital safety role played by jet blast barriers, especially at airports that handle both large jets and small commuter planes. Eric Lemar hopes it will be enough to stop such an accident from happening again.
I dare to hope. If not, what purpose did this accident serve? To have 19 passengers die and have the same thing happen again without learning anything? It would be a shame.
C'est dommage.